She never believed love could exist in a world built on deceit, until she was forced to marry the man who shattered her trust. The night sky was heavy with rain, and thunder rolled across the empty streets as Isabella stood in her wedding gown, hands trembling, heart pounding. The veil that once symbolized dreams now felt like a shroud. Her reflection in the mirror was that of a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, and trapped in a fate she didn't choose. Outside, the mansion blazed with light and laughter. Guests toasted a union built on lies, a contract of power disguised as love. Her father's debts had chained her to a man she barely knew, a billionaire whose cold reputation could freeze fire itself, Alexander Grant. When the door opened, he stood there, tall, composed, dressed in black. His presence filled the room, sharp and unreadable. "It's time," he said quietly, his voice smooth as silk, but colder than the storm outside. "Shh." She turned to him, searching for even a flicker of emotion. There was none, only distance, only the faint glint of something hidden, regret perhaps, or something darker. As the ceremony began, she felt every word burn on her tongue. "I do" was not a promise, it was a surrender. When he slipped the ring on her finger, their eyes met briefly. In that single glance, something stirred. Not love, not yet, but a spark of understanding between two broken souls who both knew they were prisoners of circumstance. Later that night, when the mansion fell silent and she stood alone in the vast room that was now hers, she whispered to herself, "This isn't love. This is survival." But somewhere deep inside, destiny whispered back, "You have no idea how wrong you are." Sometimes the coldest hearts hide the deepest wounds, and the cruelest words are only shields for pain. The morning after the wedding was eerily quiet. The house, large enough to swallow an entire life, felt more like a museum than a home. Isabella moved through the marble halls, her footsteps echoing against the walls. The weight of her new reality pressing down on her like a shadow she couldn't escape. Breakfast had already been served, though untouched. Alexander sat at the far end of the dining table, the newspaper neatly folded beside his plate, his expression unreadable as ever. The distance between them wasn't just physical, it was emotional, deliberate, like a wall he'd built long before she ever stepped into his life. "You didn't have to marry me," she said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. He lifted his gaze, calm but sharp. "Your father disagreed." Her hands clenched. Could have refused. He leaned back slightly, his jaw tightening. "And let him drown in debts that would have destroyed your family name? I did what was necessary." "Necessary?" she repeated bitterly. "You call this?" She gestured at the golden prison around her. "Necessary?" His tone didn't waver. "You'll learn to adapt." For a moment, she hated him, truly hated him. His calmness felt like cruelty, his control like a weapon. Yet beneath his composed mask, she sensed something else, exhaustion. As if the act of being ruthless had become a burden he could never set down. As she stood to leave, he spoke again, softer this time. "This isn't what I wanted either." She froze. The honesty in his tone caught her off guard. But before she could respond, he returned to his paper, the conversation shut like a locked door. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she couldn't shake his words. "This isn't what I wanted either." There was something in them, a sadness that matched her own. Maybe, she thought, they weren't enemies after all. Maybe they were just two lost souls trapped in the same lie. Sometimes love begins not with kindness, but with a single moment of unexpected care. The rain had returned that evening, soft and relentless, tapping against the glass walls of the mansion. Isabella sat near the window, staring at the endless sheets of water falling from the dark sky. Matched how she felt inside. Quiet chaos, trapped emotion, a storm she couldn't escape. She had tried to stay invisible since morning, avoiding Alexander's presence, burying herself in the library, pretending that her new life didn't feel like a cage made of gold. But when the lights flickered, followed by the sudden silence of power failure, her heart jumped. The mansion plunged into darkness. She lit a candle from the shelf, her hand shaking slightly. The shadows danced on the walls, and in that dim light, she heard footsteps approaching. "Are you all right?" Alexander's voice came from the hall, low and controlled, but carrying an edge of concern. "I'm fine," she said quickly, clutching the candle like a shield. "It's just a blackout." He stepped closer, his face half lit by the flickering flame. "The generator will start soon. You don't need to be afraid." "I'm not afraid," she replied, though her voice betrayed her. His eyes softened, just slightly. "You always try to be strong. It's admirable." For a second, she forgot to breathe. There was no sarcasm in his tone, no sharpness. It was the first real compliment he had ever given her. When the generator finally hummed to life, the lights returned, washing the shadows away. But something between them had changed, subtle but undeniable. Later, when she returned to her room, she noticed something on her table, a small porcelain figurine of a ballerina, delicate and graceful. She remembered mentioning once days ago that she used to dance as a child. There was no note, no explanation. But she didn't need one. For the first time since her forced marriage, Isabella smiled. Because the man she thought had no heart had just proven he still did. Even the strongest hearts carry scars, some seen, some buried too deep to name. The following days felt different. The silence between them wasn't as suffocating anymore. There were still no smiles, no warmth, but there was something quieter, gentler, as if both were learning how to breathe in the same space. One afternoon, Isabella found herself wandering through the west wing of the mansion, a place the staff avoided. The air there was colder, untouched. At the end of the hallway, she discovered a door slightly ajar. Inside was a study dimly lit, filled with dust and old photographs. She stepped closer to one frame resting on the desk. It was of a young boy, maybe 8 or 9, standing beside a man who looked stern but proud. The boy's smile was bright until she looked closer and noticed something strange. His eyes. Those same gray eyes she saw every day. Alexander. She turned as the door creaked open behind her, stood there, expression tight, as if she had stepped into a place she shouldn't have. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to intrude," she replied. "I just saw the picture." His gaze flickered to the frame, then away. "That was a long time ago, your father." He nodded once, jaw clenched. He was demanding. Perfection wasn't optional. There was a silence heavy with memory. "He taught me everything I know," Alexander continued. "Business, control, power, but he also taught me how to live without trust, without love." She watched him, her anger from before fading into something else, understanding. "You're not him?" she said softly. He looked at her then, eyes shadowed. "Aren't I?" "Look around you, Isabella. This marriage, It's just another deal, another control tactic. Tell me how I'm any different." She took a step closer, her voice trembling but firm. "Because you care. You just don't want to admit it." He didn't answer, turned away, his hand gripping the edge of the desk until his knuckles turned white. For a long time, neither spoke. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "Caring only gets people hurt." She wanted to reach out, to touch his arm, but didn't. Instead, she said quietly, "Maybe this time it won't." When she left the room, the photograph still stood on the desk, but Alexander's gaze lingered on the spot where she had been, his walls cracking just a little more. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with grand gestures. It slips quietly into broken places and begins to heal. Days passed, and the tension that once filled every corner of the mansion began to fade like mist under sunlight. Isabella noticed it in small ways. The way Alexander's tone softened when he spoke to her. The way he no longer looked through her but at her. He had started to see her not as part of a deal, not as an inconvenience, but as someone who somehow made the silence less unbearable. One evening, she found him in the library, the only light coming from the soft flicker of the fireplace. Papers were scattered on the table, his tie loosened, his usual perfection slightly undone. For once, he didn't look like a billionaire used to control, he looked human. "You're still working?" she asked, walking closer. He glanced up. "It's quieter at night. It's easier to think, or easier to hide," she murmured before she could stop herself. His lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're not afraid to speak your mind, are you?" "I was," she admitted, folding her arms. "But I realized fear only gives power to the wrong things." He studied her, then gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit. If you're going to challenge me, you might as well do it properly." She sat down, expecting another debate, but instead he poured her a glass of wine. The air between them was thick, not with anger, but with something unspoken, fragile, real. "Tell me," he said after a pause, "what did you dream of before?" "This," she blinked, taken off guard. "Before, you mean before the contract?" He nodded. "I wanted to paint," she said softly. "My mother used to say the world has too many broken things. I wanted to make it beautiful again, even for a moment." He looked at her for a long time, and something in his eyes shifted, like he was remembering what beauty once felt like. "You should paint again," he said quietly. She laughed, a little bitterly. "In this mansion? Surrounded by secrets and silence?" He leaned forward, voice low but gentle. "Maybe that's where beauty matters the most." For a moment, time stopped. The firelight flickered across their faces. She realized this man, the same one who had ruined her freedom, was the one who might unknowingly save her soul. Then his phone rang. The spell broke. He stood, mask slipping back into place, and said only, "Good night, Isabella." But as he walked away, she saw it. The smallest hesitation in his step. The silent war between his heart and his past. And for the first time, she wasn't sure who was saving whom anymore. Every love story hides a truth. Some are whispered, others are buried so deep that uncovering them can destroy everything. The night after their quiet conversation in the library, Isabella couldn't sleep. Her thoughts spun around Alexander, the man who had forced her into this life. It somehow became the only one who made it bearable. She didn't know when her anger had softened into curiosity, or when curiosity had turned into something dangerously close to affection. She wandered down the hallway, barefoot, drawn by the faint sound of music. A piano. The notes were raw, broken, echoing with pain that words could never hold. She followed the sound until she reached the grand music room, and there he was. Alexander sat at the piano, eyes closed, hands moving over the keys like he was confessing something to the darkness. It was in T, the music of a rich man showing off his skill. It was the song of someone remembering how to feel. Isabella stood in the doorway watching until he suddenly stopped. "You can come in," he said quietly, without looking up. She hesitated, then stepped closer. "I didn't know you played." He gave a faint smile. "I don't. Not anymore." "What changed?" He sighed, his fingers still resting on the keys. "The last time I played was at my mother's funeral. She was the only one who ever told me love was worth the risk. After she died, I stopped believing her. The confession hit her harder than she expected." She moved closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "She must have loved you very much." "She did," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "And I failed her." She shook her head. "You didn't fail her, Alexander. You just forgot how to be loved." For a long moment he stared at her, the air between them charged with emotion. Then he reached out, almost without realizing, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was gentle, hesitant, like he was touching something fragile for the first time in years. The moment was electric. Neither of them moved, but everything changed. Then suddenly, the door burst open. It was Victor, Alexander's assistant and closest confidant. His eyes widened at the sight before him, then quickly hardened. "Sir, we need to talk now." Alexander's hand fell away instantly. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by the cold mask she hated. "Go to your room," he said quietly to her, not meeting her eyes. But now Isabella. The way he said her name, soft but distant, cut deeper than any shout ever could. She walked away slowly, her chest tight with confusion. Behind her, Victor's low voice carried through the hall. "She's asking questions, sir, about the deal, about her family. She's getting too close." Her steps froze. She pressed her back against the wall, heart pounding. Her family. And just like that, the fragile world she had begun to build started to crack. The truth doesn't knock, it breaks in, tearing apart everything you thought was real. The next morning, Isabella woke up with the echo of last night still haunting her. Her family. The words wouldn't stop ringing in her mind. What did Victor mean? Why would Alexander know anything about her family? Determined to find answers, she searched the mansion while the staff kept their distance. Her footsteps led her back to the study, the same room where she had once found Alexander's childhood photograph. But this time, she looked deeper. In the bottom drawer of his desk, beneath contracts and business files, she found a locked folder labeled Reyes Holdings Confidential. Her breath hitched. Reyes. Her last name. Hands trembling, she picked the lock with a pin and opened it. Inside were documents, transactions, merger notes, property claims, all connected to her father's old company. Her family's company. The words blurred as she read the signatures. The name Alexander Knight appeared again and again. He wasn't just some distant businessman who married her by coincidence. He was the man who had bought out her father's failing empire, the same deal that had destroyed her family. Tears blurred her vision. She stumbled back, gripping the desk for balance as the truth cut through her chest like a knife. It had known her from the start. Every cold glance, every command, every deal, it had never been fate. It had been revenge. The door creaked open, and she turned, her eyes burning with fury and heartbreak. "How long?" she demanded. "How long have you known who I was?" Alexander froze in the doorway, guilt flashing across his face before he could hide it. "Isabella, I can explain." "No," she shouted, throwing the folder at him. Papers scattered like falling snow. "You used me. You destroyed my family, and then you married me to finish the job." He took a step forward, his voice low but desperate. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "Then how was it supposed to happen, Alexander?" she cried. "You were supposed to ruin me and walk away." His silence was her answer. She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "All this time, I thought I was learning to love you, but you were just rewriting your revenge." He clenched his fists, jaw trembling. "At first, yes, I wanted revenge. Your father lied, cheated my family, took everything from us. But then his voice broke. Then I met you, and I couldn't stop seeing the truth." "What truth?" she whispered bitterly. "That you were never him," he said. "You were the one thing I didn't plan for." Her heart twisted, torn between hate and longing. "You should have told me," she whispered. "You should have trusted me." He stepped closer, his expression raw. "I was afraid if I told you, I'd lose you before I had the chance to make it right." "You already lost me," she said softly, her voice trembling as she turned toward the door. "You just didn't realize it yet, and for the first time, it's Alexander Knight, the man who built empires and crushed enemies, had no words left to stop her. Love doesn't always come wrapped in honesty. Sometimes it's born from the ashes of betrayal." Rain poured down on the city that night, drenching everything in shades of silver and sorrow. Isabella stood outside the mansion gates, the same ones that had once symbolized her prison. This time, they were her escape. Her suitcase was small, almost laughable compared to the luxury she was leaving behind. But inside, it was something far heavier, a heart torn between anger and love. Behind her, she heard footsteps. She didn't need to turn to know it was him. "Isabella?" Alexander's voice cracked through the storm. He was soaked, his usual composure gone. "Please don't go like this." She turned slowly, her eyes reflecting both pain and strength. "You lied to me about everything, about why you married me, about my family, about us." He took a step closer, desperation breaking through his pride. "I didn't marry you for revenge anymore. Not after I saw who you were. You changed everything I thought I knew about love, about forgiveness." "Forgiveness?" she repeated, her voice trembling. "You think it's that easy?" "No," he said softly, rain dripping from his lashes. "I think it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. But I also think it's the only thing that'll set us both free." She looked at him, the man who had once been her enemy, her captor, her husband, and for the first time she saw not power, but regret. Not control, but heartbreak. "I don't know if I can ever forget what you did," she whispered, "but maybe someday I'll understand why you did it." He nodded slowly, as if her words were both a punishment and a mercy. "That's all I can ask for." She turned away again, ready to leave. But then something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, as if she was his last hope. Maybe it was the way the rain softened his sharp edges, turning him human again. She walked back to him, her hand trembling as she reached up and touched his face. "You broke me, Alexander. But somehow, you also made me stronger." His eyes filled with tears he couldn't hide anymore. "And you made me human." For a moment, silence filled the storm. A silence louder than thunder, softer than forgiveness. Then, without another word, she kissed him, not to forget, not to forgive, but to remember that even in a world built on lies, love could still be real. When she finally pulled away, her voice was barely a whisper. "This doesn't fix everything, I know," he said. "But maybe it's a start." And as the storm began to fade, so did the weight of their past, leaving behind two souls scarred but not shattered, bound by something stronger than pain. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive perfect. It arrives broken and teaches you how to heal.